Welcome to this week's episode of the Baseball Together podcast, Baseball Family. This week we have all MLB team candidates announced. MLB is suing insurance providers. What? And Jason and I are going to go through the worst transactions in baseball right now.
9+Us presents the Baseball Together podcast with your hosts, Blackjack Brad and Kansas City Little Big Briggy Blue Eyes. And now, Baseball Together.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Baseball Together podcast, Baseball Family. I am Brad. This week, Brig is out, so I am joined by my friend and yours, Jason D'Agostino. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Brad. How's it going?
It's going. I mean, you've noticed my struggles already, but I think we're going to make it through. I think we'll be okay.
I think so.
But hey, let's get into this. There's quite a bit going on this week. I was a little bit surprised. Mostly it's litigation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this week. But first things first, we had the All-MLB Team candidates announced. Not the final teams. Those will be announced on Wednesday. But Jason, I want to know from you, was there anybody on this list, any of those candidates, that surprised you at all?
No, in looking at the candidates, I don't think anyone really stood out to me as a shocker, especially when you look at stats and numbers. Everyone who's on here deserves to be on here. Obviously, there's people that I personally would like to see on here.
Right.
But you can't argue with some of these people who are on this list. I mean, I may not like Freddie Freeman, but I think Freddie Freeman definitely has a case to be on the All-MLB team for this past season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely does, and especially as an MVP, he has to be on there. You would think, right?
You would think, but there's a case for Jose Abreu though too.
Yeah, it's true. But the one guy I was actually really glad to see, I kind of scrolled down to the shortstop, I was happy to see Fernando Tatis Jr. on the list. I don't know that he's going to get it. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, because the other guy I would think who would get it would be Corey Seager. But like right there on the page, we're looking at the score.com. Right there, they have Corey Seager had a WAR of 1.9, and Tatis had a WAR of 2.9. So that makes me think that he's probably going to be the one who will get it, which I'd be fine. I'm a big fan of the guy. I love him. I love watching him. I just don't know if he was necessarily the one, because Corey Seager, I mean, take out the postseason even, he was a big part of the Dodgers' success.
Well, let me ask this. Why did you think Fernando was a surprise on the list? I mean, with the season he had, it makes sense that he would be in the consideration.
It does make sense for the consideration. My only thought was because he's so young. He's in his second year in the league, was all.
I can see that, but I mean the way he played this season and really how he anchored that Padres team. I mean, he was even in consideration for the NL's MVP.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that's like I said, I scrolled down to see if specifically he was on it. I was, like I said, a little bit surprised, but also happy that he was for that reason, right? Like I'm glad that he was there because I do feel like he's deserving, but mostly because he's so young. While I was like, oh wow, he made it already in consideration. But I wouldn't be surprised now looking at the WAR if he does end up getting it, if he's on the All-MLB team.
I mean, if let's go down to outfielders, if we're talking strictly WAR, you're looking at Harper, Springer, and Conforto.
Yeah. Well, those guys are on the low end. I mean, you've got Mookie Betts at 3. He's a shoo-in. He's obviously going to get it there. Ronald Acuna Jr. at 2.4. I would think he would probably be there. Juan Soto.
Trout's at 2.6.
Yeah, and I feel like Trout is a guy who you can give the MVP to every year, and you can just shoo him in for all MLB. Like there's only 2 other guys who are going to make the All MLB in the outfield. You know. So
yeah,
I think Juan Soto had
so good.
Sorry, go ahead. I think it's a lag.
No.
Cutting you off.
No worries. No worries.
But I think Juan Soto had a sneaky good year, but yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to get in because you pointed out Mike Trout. You got Mookie Betts, who is like far and away. Freddie Freeman deserved the MVP, but if they're not going to give it to him, they had to have given it to Mookie Betts, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so I think you've got him. And then Acuna Jr., I think if it came down to him and Soto, because Acuna had more of a contribution to a good team, he would probably get it over him.
I definitely think with what you're saying with Atlanta compared to Washington this season, yeah, Acuna would definitely get the nod over Soto because, like you said, he put in a kind of sneaky under the radar season, but the Nats weren't really the Nats of 2019.
Well, they were the Nats at the beginning of the 2019 season, but not the end of it. Yeah, they needed more than 60 games to get going last year.
so just kind of straying off topic, and that's what I do sometimes. I feel like the Nats are next year's going to be a test, but I feel like this season it was almost like they won that World Series and they were spent. Like they were almost hungover from winning the World Series.
I could see that, yeah. Well, and also, I mean, they didn't bring back Rendon, which is only one guy, but it feels like he probably had more of an influence, like more of a presence in that clubhouse than what anybody actually gave him credit for.
And I think a lot of people overlook the what someone does for a clubhouse. I think it's easy to overlook that compared to stats and on-field play. So yeah, I can understand how that could play a role in that.
Yeah, it does, and it's. I feel like that's sometimes more important for a clubhouse than what a guy does on the field, because teams will keep a guy on the roster simply because of the glue that he is in the clubhouse, if he's not necessarily even contributing on the field.
Well, I think not saying this guy wasn't contributing for either the Mariners or the Phils, but I can look at a Jamie Moyer and see he's the kind of guy who can bring a clubhouse together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was in the league till he's like 50, something like that.
Almost, yeah.
And he wasn't winning games that whole time.
No, he joined the Mariners as a 33-year-old, so keep that into your mind.
That's true, and it felt like he was there for a good 20 years. So how old was he when he got with
I think he was 48 when they won the World Series. So
that actually sounds correct. It actually sounds like it's probably right. But anyway, speaking of old players, and this is one of the reasons that I fight for the DH, is because it keeps older players in the league, because you can bat around for longer than you can play in the field, as long as you can hit the ball, right?
Right.
And so we've seen guys stick around the league. Like Nelson Cruz is 40 years old. He was DH last year. So what we're going to see this year is it doesn't look like we're going to be having a universal DH in 2021. MLB came out and said that it's probably not going to happen. Don't really need it, because they're looking to play a full 162 this year, which, I mean,
right,
both my fingers here. Right? So I think they're trying to shoot for as much normalcy as possible this next year. But then we have the end of the 2021 season. The CBA expires, the collective bargaining agreement, and then we can go back to universal DH forever. I mean, how do you feel about that, Jason? Would you want a universal DH? Did you like it this year?
So I think me and you had talked about this privately a few times. I was not really on board with the universal DH going into this season, because I like the strategic differences for the NL and the AL, especially in interleague and playoff games. But now that we've had it for 60 games, I don't hate it anymore. I'm not against the idea, and I think it brings a whole new strategic element to the NL that can be beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, and my big argument was it levels the playing field for free agents, because Nelson Cruz was not even going to consider making any decisions on where he was going to play next year until he found out about the universal DH, because he's not going to go to a National League team. He can't play outfield anymore.
Right.
He's up there to hit home runs, and he'll probably hit 30 or 40 next year because he's huge, and that's what he does. But he's not going to go to any team that's going to make him play the outfield. Marcell Ozuna, I mean, he was a godsend for the Braves this year as a DH. Like, that is like his position now, and the Braves are like, geez, we could use a DH. Can we move the AL now? You know? But
Yeah, I think there were more positives from the universal DH than I think people like me probably expected. Because I know I'm not the only person who had misgivings about it at the time.
well, my regular co-host is one of them, and it's still one of them. Would rather see the DH go the way of the world. So, but anyway, so we had MLB this year. We talked a few weeks ago about how MLB said that they lost $3.1 billion with a big fat B, $3.1 billion because there were no fans in the stands. Well, now it looks like they were trying to go collect that money from their insurance policies that they bought, but the insurance companies are not paying out. And I was like, well, yeah, insurance companies are going to insurance company, right? I mean, they're not going to want to pay that. So I'm not surprised. I was more surprised by the fact that they were trying to sue their insurance companies.
So, I have thoughts on MLB and a lot of the team's ownerships talking about money losses this season. And I can't believe I'm going to agree with Scott Boras on anything. But he's right in the sense that MLB's revenue is not generated by ticket sales like the NHL is a perfect example of a league that's revenues generated in ticket sales. Right. MLB has had amazing TV deals for the last 30 years, ever since they first went to CBS in 1990. And I think they signed the first $1 billion deal in sports television
history. You've got
history.
162 games. You've got 162 regular season games to collect money on. That is a ton. That's a ton of games.
It is. And then just on my personal level, being a Phils fan, last season after they signed Harper, they signed a huge deal with NBC Sports Philadelphia, or I think just NBC Sports in general, multi-billion dollars for multiple seasons to carry the games. So it's not like MLB is really hurting per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I read this article about the lawsuit, and then I was scrolling down. I immediately saw the Scott Boras one like right under it. I was like, oh, let's see what Scotty B has to say. And he said, I mean, you alluded to this. He said that teams didn't lose any money, that they made up all of the money that they paid for basically putting on the season and paying players. They made that all up with TV revenue during the regular season, and especially the postseason, which we saw how much money MLB brought in on that TBS deal for the playoffs. That was a lot. There were a lot of zeros. Let's say that, a lot of zeros. And I mean, you've got guys who did make quite a bit of money this year. I'll say that. You know, Mike Trout had a big contract. Bryce Harper had a big contract. Mookie Betts had a big contract, and they were prorated. But MLB got paid for the postseason like it was any regular year. So I'm not sure what. I mean, it doesn't seem like, looking at that, it doesn't seem like it adds up, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying, and Scott Boras could just be meddling like he does, you know, because he's got guys who need to get paid, of course. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, he's not a BSer. I mean, he will play the game, obviously, to get his guys contracts, but he knows money. Let's not act like he doesn't know the money game of baseball.
Yeah, that's like the part of baseball that he knows. Let's be real.
I mean, those 4 years in the minors back in the 70s didn't teach him anything.
It doesn't feel like it sometimes. But, no, yeah, he definitely understands the money side of it, and he knows the teams to go to who have the money are willing to spend it. You know, and so I do think he is aware to some level that they didn't lose any money. But I said back then, though, when we initially talked about this, I was like, there's an easy fix to this. Just let two groups buy in two new teams. Say the buy-in amount is $1.5 billion, which doesn't seem outrageous right now,
right?
Given what teams have been going for, and if you are down 3.1, you're pretty much even at that point. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on going forward, though, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. See baseball's potential money woes. But let's go into the last couple of things here. First, we have the Rangers hired a GM. They hired former pitcher Chris Young. Chris Young actually came up with the Rangers and made his debut pitch for them for a little while. And I actually saw the name and saw the picture. I was like, gosh, I think he pitched for the Mariners. And he did. He ended his career with the Mariners. And I was like, oh, yes, one of those guys. I knew it. But my other thought was they brought in this guy who has worked, he was in the MLB front office, but he has not worked in a team front office as like assistant GM, assistant to the GM, as far as I know. But they brought him in as a GM. And I was like, okay, you're bringing in one of your own guys, so he knows the franchise, but you got Theo Epstein on the market. And you're pretty fresh, right? I mean, I can see the wheels turning. Jason, go ahead.
Well, I feel like Epstein's kind of made it pretty clear he wants some time away from baseball. I mean, he's outright said it, and that could be bluffing. But I mean, we've seen how guys, even guys coming in as just managers, have been able to sell themselves really hard to these teams, especially with the major push for all analytics. It doesn't surprise me that this guy got the GM job with the Rangers, just strictly based on what we've seen over the last few years in baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you know, I was also thinking, just it could be Theo Epstein saying there is not a position open right now that I want to fill. Could be I want to step away from baseball for a year, reevaluate in August, say, okay, these places are probably going to have an opening. Of those, which would I rather go to? Because he can write his ticket.
Right.
Pretty much anywhere he wants to go, somebody's going to hire him. In fact, you might have a situation somewhere with like what the Angels had, where Brad Ausmus was doing his thing, managing the Angels. He'd only been there for 1 year. Then Madden, there's rumors that Joe Madden's available, and they fire Ausmus so they can bring in Madden. You know, that some team might be like, well, our GM's fine, but he's not Theo Epstein. You're out the door. You're in. Let's do this.
Right. If I was Epstein, I mean, the place I'd probably go would be the Mets anyway. I mean, they're looking to win now. They're looking to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Kills me to say
that'd
that.
probably be the best fit. I know. And the weird thing is, like, I don't really have anything against the Mets, but I don't necessarily like them. But
they're the Mets.
Definitely going to be. Yeah, they're the Mets. They met the bet all the time. But no, I do think that they're going to be an interesting team to follow with new ownership, a bunch of money to spend. They're going to be somebody interesting to follow, and yeah, it could be where Theo Epstein ends up, or make him even more watchable. Keep an eye on it. All right, last thing here, Jason, before we go to break. Family Guy at it again. I haven't watched Family Guy in a long time, but it's so funny. I love it. Made a dig at the Astros. They did a mock ESPN 30 for 30, and they showed, you know, the voiceover saying something about like it's not sure who led the trash can beating ring, but
right.
But then they panned a shot of the team, and they showed Oscar the Grouch in a trash can.
It's so good.
It is so good. It's so funny. Like, oh my gosh, I was cracking up. It's too good. I'm gonna include the link to the tweet and the doobly doo. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm gonna try to get it on the video there, because man, it's funny. It's good. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I know it was funny. I just wanted to bring it up.
It was really well done. I loved how the guy who represented the Dodgers in the 30 for 30 looked exactly like Kirk Gibson, just with a little bit more hair in the top.
He had to.
But I mean, it was a really well done gag and a great baseball reference.
Yeah. That's one thing that Family Guy does really well. When they make a reference to something outside of their little world, they do it really well. They do a good job with it. And it was funny. It was really good. But on that note, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about our 3 worst transactions in baseball.
No matter which ballpark you're at, you want to rep your team. Now you can with 9+ Us. Welcome to the Big City Series. With every design available in your team's colors, you can fit in with the home crowd or stand out on the road. Either way, we have the colors you crave. Shop the Big City Series and find designs that rep your favorite baseball podcast, cheer from the cheap seats, and much more. Shop the Big City Series only at 9plusus.com.
Welcome back, baseball family. So I totally forgot Jason. I'm so sorry, but Jason has his own podcast, the Not Another Sports podcast, where he and his friend David talk just general sports in 3 periods, and it's a good listen. Go check it out. After you listen to this episode, be sure to go give it a listen, give him a subscribe. So,
well, thank you very much.
Thank you again for joining me, Jason. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get into this. So, as a Mariners fan, I've seen years and years and years of like free agent signings gone bad, trades gone bad. And so I was like, you know what? Let's talk about bad transactions. Jason, go ahead and share with me your first, and these are in no particular order. We're not ranking these or anything. Just go ahead and share with me one of the bad transactions you wanted to talk about today.
Okay, well, let's talk about a heartbreaker for my beloved and horrible Philadelphia Phillies. So let's talk about when the Phils traded away Larry Bowa and Ryan Sandberg for Ivan De Jesus from the Cubs.
Yeah.
Now, in all honesty, so looking back, it's a terrible trade.
For the Phils,
De Jesus was never a standout player. He had great speed, but his numbers were never great numbers.
Right.
But the problem with Sandberg was there was no upward mobility for him to get onto the big show because they had Manny Trejo, who was part of that 1980 team. The whole reason the trade happened was because Larry Bowa was in a contract dispute with general manager Paul Owens at the time. And it was getting contentious, and it was starting to become an issue in the locker room. So they put Bowa up on the block. The only team interested in the trade for Bowa was the Cubs. No one else was interested in Bowa because he was in his mid-30s and he was showing signs of wear and tear. Mm-hmm. The Cubs GM at the time was Dallas Green, who in 1980 was the Phils manager who led them to the World Series. Who did Dallas Green see in their farm system?
In the Cubs farm system?
In the Phils farm system.
Oh, in the farms, in the Phils. I don't know. Tell me.
Ryan Sandberg.
Ryan Sandberg. There it is. I should have known. I thought maybe there was somebody else that he was like, oh, instead of Sandberg.
No. He wanted Sandberg specifically in that trade. The trade was more for Sandberg than it was for Bowa.
Well, I mean, he's all right.
And it's not that the Phils didn't know what they had in them; they just didn't have upward mobility for him.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That is like, I would say that is like one of the very few problems with the minor league system is that you stack because you don't know if you're going to have an injury, you don't know if somebody's going to leave free agency, or if you're going to have to trade somebody eventually. So you've got to stack behind those Hall of Famers, All Stars, and then eventually it's like, well, we got to make a move. But we have somebody in the farm system who can like fetch like, a haul. You got to make the move, and then they end up being a Hall of Famer. It's a bummer, but it happens.
Yeah, it's not something you can expect to happen. Obviously, Sandberg was an amazing player and a tremendous Cub, and clearly deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. Really, I think the Phils on paper they had to get rid of Bowa. It was just not, as we stated earlier, the presence in the clubhouse can make or break things. And this was one of those situations. Yeah,
that's unfortunate. I always chuckle when I hear Ryan Sandberg because I was first introduced to him because you know how when you're a kid and you have the signature in your glove, in your ball glove?
Yeah.
His was in my glove. Is Ryan Sandberg.
Oh, that's cool.
So I had no idea who the guy was because I didn't have any of his baseball cards for obvious reasons. And so my dad would watch Cubs games on WGN all the time. And I would just sitting there watching. I heard Ryan Sandberg. I was like, that's the guy in my glove. He's like, what? So I grabbed his show. He's like, sure enough, So that was my first exposure to Ryan Sandberg, and I was probably, I don't know, it was probably like 92, 93, something like that,
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that because it's always so funny. Like the one that I'll spoil this right now. The one that we're not going to talk about is Babe Ruth, the deal from the Red Sox to the Yankees. But it's obviously not on that scale. But the fact that you're trading a future Hall of Famer as like a secondary piece in a deal is always just like, woof.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, I've got one. So most of mine, 2 of my 3, I'll be honest, are Seattle Mariners deals. In 2008, the Mariners traded for Eric Bedard. Okay. Now this is everybody the Mariners sent to the Orioles. Tony Butler, he's a minor leaguer. Adam Jones. That's right, the Adam Jones. Cam McCollio, George Sherrill, and Chris Tillman. Tillman was not a bad player. Like I remember actually watching him coming up. But seriously, Adam Stinkin' Jones, the dude was an all-star. And they traded him for Eric Bedard, who and this was the thing that really like ticked me off with this deal, was that the Mariners, when they made this deal, the GM, I don't even remember who he was at the time, and my window's not popping up. But anyways, he said specifically, we're bringing in Bedard because he's a guy who can eat innings. Like, really? You're bringing in Bedard. You traded away. Because the Mariners, I'm pretty sure, knew what they had with Adam Jones. The Orioles obviously did. It was Bill Savasi. He got fired not long after that deal, because that deal was done in February, and he was fired in June. So, yeah, not a good deal. And Bedard was like fine for the Mariners, but not. I would have rather had Adam Jones. Like, much rather have had Adam Jones, and probably Tillman as well. It was ridiculous. So, like, obviously, it still bugs me. That deal, but yeah. Anyway.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Jones was a 5-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner. He was a Silver Slugger. I mean, he has the goods, and he had the goods. So yeah, trading, it kind of goes back to the Sandberg thing a little bit. You're trading away someone who's good and is going to continue to be good for an innings eater. I mean, not that an innings eater isn't an important role, but was he worth those players in the long run?
Well, and it's not just an innings eater, and for an all-star, there was like 5 guys that the Mariners sent to the Orioles for an innings eater. Like, let's see here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 guys that they sent for Bedard. And granted, he had a big contract at the time because the Orioles paid him. But man, unreal. And it's not surprising, like I said, the GM was fired just 4 months later. So, I don't know.
And in looking at Jones's stats, I mean, the best was still yet to come with him.
Oh yeah. He was really young when the Mariners traded him. Like, really, really young. Possibly maybe a little bit raw still, but obviously he panned out. I mean, now he played this last year in Japan, but that's because he's old. Big deal. It's fine.
And knowing that old is like younger than me kills me. Okay.
I know. When I had that realization one day that like Felix Hernandez, I want to say, is like 2 weeks or 2 months younger than me. And when I was like, I made a joke about how he's old and washed up, I was like, oh geez, what am I?
Just staying on this old topic. A friend of mine on Facebook posted about the Fred. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name now, but someone had instructional videos. And it was like, oh, if only I had these instructional videos, I would have made it to the major leagues.
Oh, Fred McGriff, those ones?
Yes, thank you. Fred McGriff.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of his last name. And I commented in the comments, go, well, I had the Reggie Jackson ones from ESPN, and I'm just now wrapping up my major league career, because I'm old.
That's good. I like that. Well, I always cracked up when I saw those videos, like the Fred McGriff ones, like at first, because it looks like they just took the same kid and like cloned him on the video and made him do just played through of him doing the exact same thing, because all the kids looked exactly the same. It looked like it was like somewhat of a military camp. They had their t-shirts that were tucked in real tight on their pants. They all had the same throw, throwing the ball into the bucket in the infield. They all had the exact same swing, everything. I was like, at the time, when I was younger, I was like, oh man, I need that. That's how I'm going to get to the big leagues. And then as I got older, I was like, that's freaking ridiculous. You don't need that. But
having the Reggie Jackson, I mean, you could tell it was a payday.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Most things were for Reggie.
Reggie didn't care. He just wanted that money.
He'll make that paper. So, all right, Jason, go ahead with your next one.
So in researching this topic, one that stood out to me, and it's the classic metting the bed. Well, no, actually, it's the opposite of metting the bed, I should say. R.A. Dickey to the Blue Jays for Noah Syndergaard. One of the few times the Mets actually got it right, and a continuation of the Blue Jays making bad trades during that time period. Because who trades away Roy Halladay in his prime?
Apparently the Blue Jays.
Obviously, I think at the time the Blue Jays thought they were getting a great deal because Dickey came off that really great 2012 season. He reinvented himself as a knuckleballer at the age of 37. But the problem with a 37-year-old knuckleballer is things can go downhill quick. Mm-hmm. And Dickey was never that 2012 Dickey again. That sounded awful.
Well, with Dickey, he actually came from Seattle, and then he went to Minnesota, and then he went to the Mets. I remember actually reading something about him before the 2008 season about like this guy. He's got like an 85-mile-an-hour knuckleball, and it's insane. Like in Seattle, they were really high on Dickey, and I'm sure. I mean, I've got to look at it, but I'm sure that they traded him away for nothing. A future Cy Young Award winner, an All-Star. Let's see, and that was at 33. Yeah, so they actually lost him for nothing. Like he oh no, they did trade him. Sorry. Nope, sorry. That was traded to the Twins, traded to the Mariners from the Twins, granted free agency, and then signed with the Twins for a year. And then he went to the Mets. So yeah, I mean, a guy who kind of bounced around, and then at that point, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean,
I interrupted.
No. I mean, he had no worries. He had that great season in 2012. He was the Cy Young Award winner, but then after that season, he was an average pitcher, and batters kind of figured him out. And he wrapped up his career in 2018 after the 2017 season. He had a bounce back season with the Braves to some degree, but at the same time, the Blue Jays gave up Syndergaard, who pre-Tommy John surgery was still a very good pitcher. His last season was in the 4 range, but he kind of stayed within that 2 to 4 area as far as ERA was concerned. Mm-hmm. He's nicknamed Thor for a reason. Yeah. He's an intimidating pitcher, which that's kind of a lost art to some degree now. You don't see a lot of guys who are intimidating on the mound. And I actually think post Tommy John surgery, he's going to come back to form just based on his work ethic alone.
Yes. But I feel bad for the guy because he has had issues staying healthy over the last few years. He had like a pec issue and he had an oblique issue, but he has such a violent delivery and he's so big and so strong that I'm not surprised. But no, I do think he'll come back from Tommy John. And if he has to reinvent himself, again, like you said, his work ethic, he's going to do it.
Right.
He'll be able to do it.
You can't question his work ethic when you watch him pitch and you listen to his interviews. I mean, the guy's dedicated. Yeah,
he definitely is. Yeah, and I'm actually a huge fan of his for that reason. That I think he's a great player. And when they had him on the trade block, what was it, last year, 2 years ago? I was like, Seattle, sell the farm, do what you got to do to get this guy, because he's somebody who could anchor that staff and do a really good job. And he's
now coming in with veteran experience, and he could help bring along some young guys and just be overall a plus for the clubhouse.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, no, that does seem like a steal though, trading Dickey for Syndergaard, especially given like the longevity of the career. Because I mean, I guess you're looking at knuckleballer, you're thinking this guy's 37, we could probably get 8 more years out of him.
Yeah.
Right. But it didn't work out. It did not work out for him. So good on the Mets for actually making a good deal and not metting the bed. All right. I have another one. So this one is actually a deal that almost led to me abandoning the Mariners as a fan. Because I'll be honest, I was like super sick of just like the repeated losing, the bad moves. And this is actually, let's see, what year was it? I know who the GM was, but I gotta double check my year on it just to make sure that I'm getting this right. So the GM was Jack Zorenzik. He actually replaced Bavazzi after he was fired.
Okay.
They brought him in, signed him in October 2008. So let's see here. Cano, the Mariners signed him in December of 2013 as a free agent. And golly, if Jay-Z didn't walk into that room and she's like, pay the man. And that was like the end of it. Like they gave him everything. They paid him exactly what he wanted. He wasn't necessarily worth it, but they gave him everything. They gave him this massive contract. At the time, it was the biggest in baseball. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Yes, he's a power hitting second baseman. But there are so many other needs on this team than a power hitting second baseman. Absolutely unreal. So they bring in Cano thinking, oh, this guy, he's going to save the franchise. He's going to lead us to the promised land. No, not if you have that lineup. Like, he even went on, I think it was ESPN, because ESPN was providing, like, covering the Mariners because they had Robinson Cano. So they have, I want to say it was Buster only had Cano on during spring training. He goes, what do you think of this team? He's like, well, we need a few more bats. Yeah, but can't afford to get them because they're paying you all the money in the world.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, that's exactly the problem. Jack Zorenzik, who, according to articles that I've read, lied on his resume about his experience with baseball.
Oh, Jesus.
Goes in there and says, he's like, I'm all about statistics. I'm all about analytics. And then come to find out, he was there for like, I want to say they fired him in 2014, something like that, finally. And they're just like, oh, he didn't know anything about what he was doing. He was learning on the job. And that's why we are in baseball purgatory. And then Scott Service finally comes in, or Jerry DiPoto, sorry. Those two came in together. But DiPoto comes in and he's like, we got to figure out a way to get out of this Cano deal. And then finally the Mets eventually are just like, we'll take him. We like overpaid former superstars. Oh, he tested positive for PEDs? That's fine. He learned his lesson. And he didn't learn his lesson. And I just laughed. The Mariners aren't paying him anymore. Don't have him taking up a roster spot. So finally got out from under it. But man, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I gotta admit here, I've never really been high on Cano.
Me neither.
All the hype around him to me was undone in 2009 watching the Yankees play the Phils and seeing him compared to Chase Utley. Now I'm a huge Chase Utley fan and I will own that. But seeing the way both of them play the game, there was no way you could convince me he was better than Utley at that moment in time.
Oh, I know. And when I heard that he was asking all that money when he was a free agent, I was like, well, good luck. Nobody's going to pay you. Of course, my team's the only one dumb enough. And there was nobody even else like knocking at the door. They were bidding against themselves. It was Zorenzik was like, well, we need a big name. This is the only guy on the market. Let's pay him. What are other teams offering? Nobody else is offering. Well, then let's give him what he wants. No. Negotiate, man. So you get paid to do.
And my thought is, how much of that was just to get people in the stands because you had a big name?
A lot of it was. And, I mean, my dad bought in on it. He bought a Cano t-shirt. And I was just like, come on now, And so I know there were people who did. But a few years later, we actually went to a game. It would have been 2014, because Wilson was just born. We were at a game, and he struck out 3 times in a game against the Yankees. And every single time he struck out, the lady behind us goes, 8 more years of this. Oh, man.
That's a fan right there. That is a diehard right there.
Yep. Yeah, just seriously, I heard it 3 times a game. 8 more years of this. But I mean, I'll give him this. He's a great defensive player. He makes defense look easy. I've said it before that defense is tough, and he makes it look easy because that's what they said every time he made a play in Seattle. But
the only problem is there's just baggage that comes with him.
There is, especially now, and you don't want it. And at the time, the Yankees weren't bringing him back because they were worried about PED system. They were like, well, if this is a concern, it's something we're going to have to deal with. We don't want it. That's why they let him walk.
Well, the Yankees had enough issues with PEDs over the years, too.
Yeah, yeah, they did. Yeah.
Sorry, Brig.
Well, we're gonna get into a good reference here for Brig, make him happy about something we're talking about in a few minutes. But Jason, why don't you go ahead with your next one?
So my next one is one I think that could be looked at almost through different time periods, almost.
Okay.
So we're looking at Bartolo Colon for Cliff Lee, Grady Sizemore, and Brandon Phillips. So the reason I said that this could be almost looked at over a period of time is because, one, Colon had a long career.
Yeah.
And he's still playing now in Mexico.
Not surprised.
Cliff Lee was a former Cy Young whose career was cut short due to injury. Sizemore, another really good player, multi-time All-Star, career was cut short by injury. Phillips had the longest career of the 3 of them. He retired in 2018, 3-time All-Star, multiple Gold Gloves. Career was the longest out of all of them, but still, none of those guys outright lived up to the hype that was surrounding them at one point or another. Yet Colon is still going strong.
Yeah. So you're talking, are you talking Cliff Lee, Sizemore, and Phillips were traded from Cleveland?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I know all the women in Cleveland were very upset when Grady Sizemore was traded, because at the time the Indians actually had a sign out in center field that was there was a section called Grady's Lady.
Grady was a good player. Like, even though he was on the downside when he signed with the Phils in 2014, I'm like, oh man, like he still has something left, and he had nothing left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, he was a really good player. I liked him. I liked watching him. He was very good. 3-time All-Star for a reason. Silver Slugger, 2-time Gold Glove. He's awesome.
He was a very good player, but just like with Cliff Lee, the injury bug. And then once that injury bug hits you, you're fighting a different battle now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're never the same. Like we talked about it with Ken Griffey Jr., that once he got hurt in Cincinnati, he just never fully recovered. And it torpedoed the second half of his career. But it's the same thing with Sizemore and Cliff Lee. So.
And Lee anchored some really bad Phils teams.
Did he?
When he was there.
You know, when it was so it was Cliff Lee, Roy Halladay, and was it Dan Herron was the other guy?
Roy Oswalt.
That's right.
It was Hamels and then Joe Blanton. Who I really like Joe Blanton. He was an innings eater, but he was a good innings eater when he was good.
Maybe I'm thinking of when it was Hamels. When it was Hamels, Lee, and Halladay. I called those guys the Holy Trinity because they were so good. They were so good together.
There's a play that Lee did in the 2009 World Series that was just ridiculous. That behind the back line drive catch.
Oh yeah.
Like he just made it look so easy.
He made a lot of things look easy that he shouldn't have, because he's just so like blasé about everything. Like, right. He made that. It's like, what the? He just like throws it around. Just another Tuesday, fellas. And
it's just a shame that his career ended the way it did. I mean, he never had a proper goodbye. He just kind of faded away.
He did. And that's true, because he came to Seattle. The Mariners traded for him. And it was supposed to be him and Felix Hernandez. They were supposed to win the World Series that year. The man did everything go south real fast, like it usually does in Seattle. And by like May, he was demanding a trade. I think they traded him at the deadline to the Rangers. Yeah,
so he was with the Phils for a little bit of 2009. In 2010, he split the year between Toronto and the Mariners. And then he went to Texas for part of 2010.
That's right.
And then 11, 12, 13, and 14, he was with the Phils again.
That's right. Yeah, the Mariners traded him to Toronto, and it was kind of like, I guess we cut our losses on that one, because he was not happy. He was not happy with the pitching coaches. He wasn't happy with the way the pitching staff, like the work ethic, that like he was doing stuff. And Felix Hernandez was just like, "What are you doing?" You know, he'd tell him about like why he's doing something to like warm up and doing his bullpens or whatever. He's like, "Oh, I've never heard of that before." And Felix Hernandez actually credited him a lot with like helping him develop into the pitcher that he became, because of the stuff that he taught him in that short little stint that he was there. But it shouldn't take a veteran coming in and be like, "You guys are doing this all wrong. I'm going to do my own stuff," for somebody to learn that. It was so bad. So bad. It was run so poorly for so long. Oh, so frustrating.
They'll get there. They will get there.
I'm telling you, man, I said at the end of last year, I said sometime this decade, the Mariners are going to win a World Series, and I stick by it. I mean, I'm going to say, like, I'm going to narrow it down and say, like, I'm going to say 2024, the Mariners are going to win a World Series. Right now, I'm saying it.
That's not unrealistic, though. I mean, they have talent. Let's not act like they don't.
They do. They have a ton of talent. They have a lot of really good arms in the farm system right now, too, who they're, like, really babying and taking their time with to make sure they're ready when they come up.
And that's what the farm system's supposed to do. Hopefully they don't trade them away and get trade happy, which happens. We've seen it both of us.
It does. And that's one thing that like you see on Facebook and stuff with Mariners fans are like especially Kyle Lewis, like, "Oh, well, he'll be a Yankee in 2 years." Like, no, DePoto has a plan and he's part of it. These pitchers are part of this plan. Like, you can see that he knows what he's doing. He has probably even like an 8-year plan of like when guys are going to come up and when they're going to peak, who he's going to sign, who's he going to trade. Like, I think he's got it all planned out, because it sure feels like it.
And he probably does. I mean, if he's coming in with a game plan, he's going to make that happen. And I'm a firm believer that farm systems win championships.
I totally agree. I mean, we saw it with the Astros. The Astros have been contenders for 4 years in a row now, 3-4 years in a row now, because of their farm system.
Trash cans notwithstanding.
Trash can notwithstanding. That's right. But, I mean, assuming they weren't cheating this year, you know, there wasn't a buzzer or whatever, like 162 game season, I could see them having won the West, coming in with a higher seed, and making it to the World Series again. I could see that. I could have seen that happening this year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because there is talent there. So, and the farm system homegrown. But anyways, all right. Grady Sizemore, Cliff Lee. Yeah, that is brutal, especially with Bartolo Colon.
Still playing.
Yeah, still playing to some degree. Home runs? I don't know, but still playing.
Dedication.
Yes. All right, the last one that I have. So this is a nod to Brig. He finds some way, somehow, to bring this deal up in like every single episode, every single week he does this. Okay. So we're going to talk about Giancarlo Stanton. Certainly with the Yankees, in case anybody is not aware, for those of you who are not. Okay. So first, we have to go a little bit of the background, because he has this massive contract. That's what Brig keeps referring to. And what it was he was with the Marlins, and they signed into this massive deal. Okay. It was like 13 years and like $100,000 million, something like that. So I don't know exactly what it was, the exact figures. I'm not going to add it up, but it was this massive contract, the biggest at the time. And then suddenly in 2017, the Marlins were like, "Oh, we don't want to pay him anymore, or anybody else on our team." So they traded away a bunch of guys. Traded away Stanton to the Yankees and got Jose Devers, Starlin Castro, Jorge Guzman. Okay. And the Yankees do this, right? They see a guy who can hit a whole bunch of home runs, pretty good defensively, but they just see those big home runs, and their eyes get really big, and they're like, "Yeah, we got to have this guy. We need him. We need him in our system." And so they traded away a bunch of pretty decent players for him. And man, has he not produced since he's gotten to New York? Brig basically called him MIA during this season because he said that he was working on his tan all season and trying to get his eyebrows plucked perfectly, which sounds about right based on what we all saw. Then
he does have some epic eyebrows.
He does. He almost has the Rock eyebrows too. Like if you look at him, you know, the Rock's eyebrow like goes up to his hairline.
Oh, see, I was gonna say like they were like Joey Lawrence, but that works too.
Oh goodness, that's a good one. They feel more like the Rock's eyebrows to me, but like since he's gotten to New York, his first season with the Yankees in 2018, and he I got Baseball Reference is lagging on me right now.
So he only missed 2 games in 18. He played 158 games in 18, so he missed 4 games.
So he missed 4 games, but then in 2019 he played 18 games, and this year he played 23 of the 60, which isn't too bad. A lot of guys only played about 20 games or so because of injury, because there was that weird summer camp, spring training thing that they did, and I don't think guys were ready for that or be ready necessarily for the season because of that thing. So I'm fine with him missing some time during this season. But last year he played 18 games, but only had 3 home runs in those 18 games. And then in 2018, he went from 59 homers down to 38 in one last game. His OPS went from 1.007 to 0.852. So I think he's got a legitimate gripe. Because Starlin Castro was a good player. A good second baseman, and granted they have DJ LeMahieu now, but I think Starlin Castro is a good player. He was a good player for the Yankees, and now you've got this, and you're paying him for that long. I mean, let me scroll down again, but I mean they've got him on the books until, let's see here. I want to say it's like 2028. There's a $25 million team option with a $10 million buyout in 2028. Yeah. That's a long time. The Mariners will be World Series champions before that time. So, I mean,
bold statement. It's possible the Marlins could be World Series champions by that time.
It's possible. With the way they played this year, they could be World Series champions next year. Like, yeah, and it's because they dumped that Stanton contract and they traded away Christian Yelich when everybody was shaking their heads on Marcell Ozuna. Like, I don't know, man. The Marlins definitely won that trade.
The Marlins, I think, the moves that everyone were thinking were questionable have been paying off, though, for them. I mean, they got rid of Real Muto.
They did, yeah. That was the other one I just remembered. Yep.
And they got Jorge Alfaro from the Phils, who was a good catcher for the Phils when he was there. They were making trades to build a small market, small money team, and they're starting to deliver now.
They are, yeah. And it's a little bit frightening, I'll be honest, because I was killing Derek Jeter. I was absolutely just like running his name through the mud, saying like, he doesn't know what he's doing. This is just absurd. But clearly he knew what he was doing. He had a plan. If you got a plan that looks silly at the time, I guess it pans out. Because I think they hit a year before they're supposed to, honestly. I don't know that they're necessarily supposed to compete this year, but I think they hit a year ahead of schedule, and they're really going to focus on making the moves they need to next year to get them to the next level.
I think next year we need to see if they're going if this year was an aberration or if this is the trend for this team moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. It could be an aberration with a short season because they could have fallen off a cliff in month 3, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, they're like I say it all the time, but they're definitely a team to keep your eye on to see if they do make the moves, or if, like you said, it was an aberration coming out of Cinderella story coming out of nowhere. Used to be groundskeeper and now playing at the Masters. But and that could be the Marlins, but who knows?
Oh man.
Anyway, let's wrap this up before it gets too lengthy and we get too deep into Caddyshack. Baseball family, thanks for joining us this week. Especially thank you to Jason for joining me like last minute, filling in for Brig. Hopefully Brig is back next week, but we'll keep you updated on that. He's got some stuff he's dealing with today, so we hope that he gets back soon. But Jason, again, co-host of the Not Another Sports podcast. It's a good listen. General sports, if you're into all sports, go ahead and take a listen, especially hockey, right? You guys are big hockey guys?
So David's a big hockey guy. David played hockey. We actually talked about it on the last episode. He played for Hooters.
That's right. Yeah, you did talk about his Hooters jersey.
So he's a big lifelong hockey fan. I'm a baseball fan, obviously. But we try to talk all sports. Definitely of the thought of just two friends hanging out, talking sports, and that's about it.
Yeah. It's a fun listen. It's a good time. Sorry, go ahead.
You can find us at facebook.com/notanothersportspod.
There you go. Go like their page and give them a follow. It's a good time. But baseball family, don't forget to jump on the shop, 9plusus.com. Spell it out, NINETLUS.com. We've got some stuff coming. Right now we have a Christmas shirt for you. We call it Jingle Balls, the little ornaments like a baseball. So check it out. You can get that just in time for the Christmas season. We have just a couple days, actually, for you to have guaranteed shipping to have that wrapped and under the tree by Christmas. Make sure you have those orders in by the 10th. If not, it'll probably come after. But who doesn't like a late Christmas present? I know I do. I like it when stuff comes like kind of straggling in a little bit after Christmas. That's fun. Kind of continues the Christmas joy. But anyways, go over there and find something nice, something you like for yourself or somebody on your list. And don't forget to stop by baseballtogether.com. You can watch the podcast, you can listen to the podcast. You can submit to our mailbag. You can send us an email. You can send topic suggestions, ask us questions about anything about baseball, about us, whatever you want. If you want to come on the podcast, in fact, drop us a line and let us know. We'd love to have listeners on the podcast to talk to you about what it is that you like about baseball. Just talk to you about you. That would actually be a ton of fun. If you want to come on, let us know. We'll make it work. We'll bring you on. It'll be a good time. But baseball family, we hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks again to Jason for joining me last minute, and we will catch you next week.